Yesterday morning, I took a wander out to take a look at our neighbor spot where we're developing the high tunnel and talk about some literally hand-dug swale systems for redirecting water. I'd like to go back out there this morning. Excuse me, birds. Birds are crazy harvesting elderberry and seaberry right now. Take a look in the high tunnel and look at the actual plants that are growing, how things are evolving there. So let me take a look and stick around. For those that are interested in that Venturi compost aerator project, I should be perfectly frank and transparent. The pump broke at one point, it got some stuff jammed in it, and so we just have had that on pause. We might return to it this fall, but there's just so many moving parts. But for those of you that wanted an update on that video, this is how it looks. It's sitting still. The water does not smell. It actually has a really nice aroma to it. It's a nice rested aerobic compost tea, probably with some anaerobic aspects, but we use that to hand water in here and it works fine. We'll revisit this sometime. But yeah, this is the high tunnel in peak summer moment, doing pretty well overall. The hand dug water redirection system, along with hand watering as needed, the swales that are in here that can do deep flood irrigation and being able to readily apply water when we see water stress on plants. That's been very, very nice. It's worked really well. Plus, we've also had a very abundantly rainfall-rich second half of the growing season, so we don't have to water in a really reserved way. So plants are growing in a nice way. The basic infrastructure to spread water and deliver that is deepening. And so let's take a look at some of the actual plants here. We can start with some figs. A couple of years ago, a really thoughtful and generous YouTube member of our channel reached out and offered up some fig cuttings for some really nice cold hardy varieties. Thank you, Daniel, so much for that. Just for your sake, you know how well they're actually doing in here. We've got a variety called Vern's Brown Turkey. I think there's around 7 varieties in here. Almost fully, every single one of them died flush to the ground this last winter. And not because they're not cold hardy, but because, and I'll take a look at it in more detail, I just hadn't finished buttoning up the doors. There's a window section at the top that I had intended to make automatic. In fact, you can see it's another example in the spirit of the aeration thing. It's a good idea, it's valuable, valid, and then it requires more attention to actually get finalized or to work. But here's this idea of a window that would be able to open and close with a wax piston to help automatically vent. But we just hadn't finished them and there were air gaps. This was kind of floppy. And so we had a couple very cold nights last winter. The figs experienced that and they were damaged right to the ground. I suspect with the growth that they've put on, coupled with making sure we try at least to finalize these windows so that they are truly buttoned up, coupled with coming back around to this compost heating idea. The infrastructure's here, just a matter of filling it with stuff this fall. So we've got a radiant heat source and a place where fertility is being generated. If those conditions are met, and they're not extremely high bars to hit, I think we can get to a place where these figs would be absolutely cold hardy in here and start to become some canopy elements. And some of them are just spectacular. This is all from one fig, and again, just all growth from the ground after being damaged by the winter. Look at that. Whoa. Can you see it? Oh yeah, there we go. Beautiful dragonfly. That's really sweet. I'm wondering, I don't need to talk that quietly around a dragonfly. I don't think they'd be startled by that. Anyway, here's this fig, and it remains to be determined. It feels like in the high tunnel, these figs that are starting, I think if we don't have a brutally cold early fall, they should be able to actually mature. There's probably around 25 or 30 all throughout here. Even if they don't, they're really beautiful. I'm hopeful that they do. And this is one called Black Bethlehem. I would do well to make some actual metal tags now that I know that they are going to be here for the long run, and make sure we don't lose these variety names because it's pretty special to have them. So at some point we might offer fig cuttings of different varieties once we know that they're hardy to our area. And it's sweet to see them being integrated here with, here's some tomatoes that we ran string and we're doing the clip system, which I can look at a little bit more. We bought a bunch of used clips from someone and they're really sweet. And my idea in the future is to have these figs exist as a scaffold in here, that it's not just figs, but that they're here and they've got peas climbing on them, or they have tomatoes leaning on them. and try to integrate them as, if they're going to be a canopy structure, that they offer some of the functions that those would offer outside in a food forest, that they're also scaffold for vines. And then a little further down on the south side, but certainly getting maybe a little bit less light than they would love, is a habanero. So I'm trying to think through, these are plants that most likely came up in jungles way back when. I don't think they would have been in flat, open agricultural context. These tropical fruits like peppers and tomatoes. Same idea with ginger. Ginger is distinctly an understory character. And so how can we start mimicking these contexts? I'd like to learn more. Folks, please in the comments share. Am I really misunderstanding the origin story of peppers and tomatoes? But to my mind, my intuition, I imagine them just like this, where you've got nice, fast-growing green cover, and then in sunny little pockets, so this is the south, hot peppers and tomatoes being able to climb, cucumbers being able to climb up and into these jungle characters that are periodically cut or snapped by wind and rain, or by us with pruners, and fed back to these other elements. So mimicking, to the best of my intuition, a jungle sort of context in here has been pretty fun. That little habanero tucked in under the fig, most of the fruits are still pretty green, but they're ripening up. Here's one that's getting a fair bit more sun, and they're enjoying it a bit more. We've got some harvesting to do. These are some gorgeous habaneros ripening up, and they're on the south side of the bed. I think that makes the most sense. I think if we were to add more perennials in here, I'm thinking about putting in 2 varieties of Russian pomegranates in the center of these beds so that we have more woody perennial aspects, but the south side will always be reserved for more heat-loving crops that we want to see mature really nicely. But yeah, habanero is growing pretty nicely there. A couple really gorgeous chonkers. It's a green pepper. We'll probably wait a bit. It's a little risky to wait for a while, but we'll wait a bit to see if these will get some nice red ground color before we harvest. And that's nice. They're peppers resting on a little bed of Tulsi, holy basil. So we don't have any actual standard Genovese basil growing in here that's out in the field. The Tulsi is in here. Ooh, that smells so nice. If you have not interacted with fresh Tulsi in your life, I encourage you to do so. Even in a cold climate, this can be grown as a hot weather annual, and there are seeds readily available online. Very special fresh herb, and really, really profoundly gentle but thorough medicine for tea in the winter. We love that plant. Getting along nicely with a big tuft of parsley. And then another character that we plan on working much more with in here, rosemary. In fact, I'm going through, and plants that overwintered gracefully this last winter are the ones that we're applying stool layering. We're putting compost up their stems. We'll let them rest with that over winter and then be able to take rooted divisions in the spring. And the plan is wherever there are gaps in less accessible places. So over here, a little harder to get over there. So we've got some rosemary, we've got a green pepper for now, but maybe this will all be rosemary. We can almost come through with like hedging shears and harvest rosemary a few times a year. Learn the lesson pretty much every year that if we put in the effort to do the proper training of tomatoes, things work better. Who'd have figured? Here's some nice tomatoes. Find black creme, I think, is the variety here. We'll see. They're ripening up pretty nicely. Some cracking, some blemishes, but I think those would be nice tomatoes. These are ones that are on a string with that clip. I think this comes from Johnny's, but there's probably other options. I just bought a few hundred used from a farm that was retiring. I don't think I'd buy them new, but I do really like them. And so we've trained this tomato, pinching off the internodes a little bit here or there, and it's worked out pretty nicely. It's growing. I'm sure folks that do tomatoes commercially see all sorts of issues with this. I mean, that's kind of a weird move on my part, but whatever. Tomatoes not our primary crop, but it does feel nice to try to get them right each year. They do, when you do the right thing by them and it's a good year, it's pretty amazing what the yields can be. I'm excited to come through here with Sasha and start getting the first rounds of sauces. Probably not enough happening just yet to do canning or processing, but it's starting. And there's definitely lots more on here. It's lovely to see what feels like some decent compatibility. It was hopeful compatibility when we set it in motion this spring, is actual ginger. So this is true Not Miyoga wonderful perennial ginger, which has an edible flower, but true standard, you buy it in the store ginger. We got these from Biker Dude or Hawaiian organic ginger seed source. In the future, I think I might get just simply organic ginger from a local co-op for $3 or $4 a pound and try sprouting them that way in the future. We'll see. They don't seem very huge, but maybe that's what they do. I'm going to keep hilling them with really rich compost as time allows. And we'll harvest them carefully, thoughtfully in the fall with a hori to try to preserve the soil structure here. And we'll share notes on how that unfolds. It's the first year we're growing ginger. And if you've got ideas or see some glaring issues, let me know. I imagine the ginger yield to be lower being mixed with the tomatoes, but I just loved the idea of those two crops growing together. And so far, I think it's really pretty and decently functional. In the process here of spreading out some compost, we'll call it extremely rich mulch. This is material from the chicken yard, compost that has not had time to age very much, but looks good and smells good. And Juan and I were working yesterday with our wonderful friend Michael. Michael, thank you so much for all the help. It's really sweet to connect and work together. And we all were moving crates of the compost from the chicken yard. We loaded up the truck, brought them over here up the driveway. And so we're dumping them out and then spreading them around and then watering them in with the rainwater. And so I feel like the tomatoes, the ginger, getting all this excess nutrient washed down into the soil for them is going to be immensely helpful for the rest of the season. And then there are spots like this where there was some openness. It's one of the few areas where there were gaps around plants that were in. So lemongrass and rosemary doing their thing. And then this area we dumped 2 full crates, spread them out, soaked it thoroughly. And then I put in a bunch of these lettuce transplants yesterday and they look like they're doing pretty well. If it was a brutally hot and sunny day, the way I did this would not have worked too well. But what I did is simply went outside. I've talked about this recently in saving seeds. What I'll often do is take the tops of the plants once we're done collecting the seeds from them and just throw them somewhere where there's rich soil that's relatively weed-free. So everything you're seeing here is not transplanted in or sown. It's just heads of lettuce and heads of mustard that were dropped out here. And so in the process of thinning these, we'll weed a little bit. It's not like we do absolutely nothing. I'll pull some dandelions, I'll pull some horsetail. It's a beautiful plant, but it's in the way. Anyway, we'll go through, and so for example, this soil is so rich out here, I would be more thoughtful to use a hori or a tool, but it's functional. This is exactly how I did these yesterday, to just, because this is such rich compost, freshly deposited yesterday and hydrated. We've got these kind of ripped, beat up bare root transplants. If I had a pair of scissors, I could snip some of the bigger leaves. But for a one-handed demonstration with no tools, this is still going to probably work. Put the camera down for a second and actually did it. That's that little handful of some sort of mustard. Anyway, beautiful, tasty mustard, volunteer seeds coming up because we put the seed heads right there into rich, mucky soil. I'll water that in once. Maybe we'll put some hay mulch around these, but that's a really great low intensity, multiple yield way to get populations filled out in these high tunnels. And if we look at it through that lens, here's where 2 heads of lettuce, leftover seed heads, were thrown. That is a massive amount of nursery stock to transfer into the high tunnel, get soaked in at actual spacing, and have incredible lettuce production for the winter. That pattern repeats everywhere out here. There's some more random mustards from ripping up some or processing seeds there. I processed red Russian kale over the walkway here. These definitely will get moved in because this is where we walk. These will almost certainly be crushed by our feet, and so that is nursery stock. In fact, they've been walked on. They keep growing. I'll come out with a hori and lift those and transplant them in. The walkways themselves are a source of nursery stock if we save seed all the time and are pretty loose in how we do it. There's volunteers always. So as time allows, the work will be to identify spots like here, this fig. We don't want to do any more disturbance. We just want to do deposition of compost. And this whole area could be sown into crops, but we have so many little lettuces and kales and mustards, winter crops, we can start transplanting in beautiful little bands in here. We can put in some shade-loving plants. Maybe we'll look for some cilantro or parsley seedlings that we can transplant into here. Pardon my hand, that's just what we get when you touch soil. These crops will die in the fall after the first frost, so will the zucchini. But the cold weather crops can be getting started in the shade of all this. And then this winter, we'll have dormant rosemary as an overstory and dormant lavender. These will be used as a mulch. This is lemongrass, so we'll harvest what we want and use the rest as a straw mulch for the lettuces, the kales, the mustards that will be here all winter. That's the work through here as well. It's gonna be a little tricky with the ginger because these require digging. So I think I'll do is prioritize transplanting right around the tomatoes and in all of these gaps where the compost went, but that there's shade being cast by overstory plants, but not filled with crops right now. And around the ginger, maybe what we'll do is toss some turnips or relatively quick radishes. So we get ground cover, we get biomass and organic matter happening around the ginger. And then when we need to dig the ginger, we can also pull whatever turnips or radishes are there rather than feeling sad that we're disrupting kales that could have lived all winter. But lots and lots of gaps in here for so much winter successional stuff to happen. And then some really nice open blocks. This would be areas where we could direct sow things. We'll move this aside a little bit, make little troughs and put seed starting mix and then sow that out. But this is the high tunnel in mid-August, a couple years in from being built. This is from Farmer's Friend. It went up in price immensely, but so has everything. The original investment was $1,100 to build this high tunnel, and I'm so thrilled we did. Lots more to talk about, but this is enough for now. Let me know what questions you have, and we'll do updates as we do our transplanting in here. We'll talk about how the ginger harvest goes, what sort of propagation experiments we might do with the fig, whether they fruit or not. Lots more updates to do, but that's it for now. Thanks so much. Take care.